Number 4. This happened during a Boy Scout campout when I was 15. My friend, who was supposed to share the tent with me, called out from the trip at the last minute, so that meant I had to pitch the tent and sleep in it alone. The sun was going down, and after a long day of hiking, we got back to camp to set up our tents. It was already dark at that point, and I was still trying to set it up. It wasn't as easy doing it yourself. Someone came over and finally helped me, and then we ate dinner. After the cliched telling of scary stories around the campfire, we all went to sleep. I guess I was a little happy that I had my own tent at that point, since I had more room. I fell asleep quickly, but woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of somebody stomping around my tent. I immediately assumed it was another scout going to take a leak or something. You may be thinking that all our tents were pitched right next to each other, but our scoutmasters actually had us pitch our tents far apart, so I was pretty far from my closest scoutmates. The stomping around the tent seemed to just be going around in a circle, so at that point, I was sure somebody was messing with me. I asked who it was, and in response to that, they stomped off into the woods. I almost found myself going out and following them, but I figured it wasn't worth it, and just tried to fall back asleep. But after that, it was hard to. Sure enough, the stomping came back, and started circling the tent again. I was pissed off now, so I got up and unzipped the door to the tent. I was expecting to see another scout, but when I confronted the person making the noise, instead I saw a grown man, probably 6'5", in his mid-30s. My heart was racing and I couldn't even gather up the courage to scream. The man gave me a creepy smile, and then brought his finger to his lips, signaling for me to be quiet. I did a quick 180 and sprinted to my scoutmaster's tent, screaming like a baby. He ran out before I even reached the tent, and I told him about the man I saw. He and the other scoutmaster ran over to my tent with one of the hunting rifles, but they didn't find the man. They did, however, pick up on the tracks the man left walking around the tent. We were all told to bring our tents closer together, like literally right on top of each other. The trip was cut short the next day and we all went home. I have never gone camping since, and I never will again. Number 3. So me and a couple of my buddies went camping last summer alongside the Willamette River. We actually had a decent hike into the deep end of woods. We did some night fishing, listening to music, and basically drank to the point where everything was funny later in the night. I would guess we finally called it a night somewhere past 2 a.m. I shared a tent with one of my buds, while the other two shared another tent. We heard them laughing about something. At first we laughed at the sound of their laughing, but it soon got annoying and we yelled for them to shut up. One of them responded, "It isn't us." I sat up, startled at the response. I came to realize that it was the sound of only one person laughing, and it didn't sound like either one of my friends. Even in my drunk state, I realized how odd it was for somebody to be out this far in the woods so late at night. The laughing gradually got closer and louder to our campout. My friend shot up and looked at me with a worried look on his face. I heard my other friends scream over to us that they were getting freaked out. As the laughing got even closer, I could make it out very clearly to be the laugh of a male, probably in his 30s or 40s. He sounded like he was as drunk as us, messing around with friends, but we only heard his laugh, nobody else. There was something indescribably creepy about his laugh too, as if it was missing something to it. You had to be there to understand what I mean. The laughing was now just at the edge of our campsite. But we couldn't hear any footsteps at all. Now that may not seem like a big deal. It was impossible to move through that without making noise. And finally, all of a sudden, the laughing stopped completely. We had no idea where whoever that was standing, as he hadn't made a single stepping sound. We sat there in silence looking at each other. My friend was clearly freaking out, but he was keeping it together the best he could. Finally, something broke the silence. The sound of something rubbing against the cottony fabric of the tent. We saw the outline of a hand through the moonlight, pressing on the tent. We both screamed at the top of our lungs before getting out of the tent. We ran as fast as we could through the woods, our other friends following us. After about 5 minutes of running, we somehow found our car. I actually puked from running so much before taking the wheel. I don't condone drinking and driving, but I still believe we were just in this situation. By far the most horrific experience of my life. No idea who or what the hell that was, or what they wanted. Number 2. After college, I went backpacking in the Canadian wilderness for a few weeks by myself. To put this in perspective, I was in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town was a 3-hour bus ride away, and I only saw one other person, who was from a distance. He was in a canoe, during the entire 7 days. I brought a few disposable cameras with me, as this was before digital cameras were too widespread. I took a lot of pictures. When I got home, I had them developed and took a look at them. The pictures were standard nature shots, until I got about halfway through my first camera. There were 2 pictures of me asleep in my tent in my sleeping bag. I literally freaked out when I saw it, and I had a complete breakdown. To this day, I have no idea how those pictures got taken. I haven't been camping since, and I sleep with my door open and my curtains shut, and I still get the paranoid feeling that whoever took those pictures is still watching me somehow. Number 1. My boyfriend and I decided to go out to the gorge for some quality time camping. We had always gone with several other people, but this was the first time it was just us two. When we got out of our car to prep our gear for the mile hike back to the camping spot, 2 sketchy looking dudes came out of the trailhead, eyed us, and went back onto their old school Volkswagen camper van. I had a weird feeling but shrugged it off and proceeded back to our camping spot. I had previously camped in the same area a handful of times, and I knew it pretty well. Once we got back there, I knew of a handful of different camping spots and proceeded to check them all out for the one that would be ideal for us. I noticed what looked like someone camping further up the hill, so I picked a spot a little further down where we'd most likely be out of sight. Not out of earshot though, as I heard him yelling with someone else back over on the trail. It was starting to get dark by the time we got everything set up, so I figured I'd start looking for firewood. Suddenly, this guy appears out of nowhere and asks us if we'd like any help, and offered to sell us a bundle of firewood for $10. I laughed because we were in the woods, thus surrounded by wood, which I could pick up off the ground for free. He then said that I wouldn't find much because they'd already cleared it out over the past few weeks. Few weeks? I asked him how long he'd been camping up there, and he said almost a month. I already had the creeps about him, and he claimed he was up there by himself. I asked him why I heard him yelling with someone then, and that he had referred to more people when he was talking about the wood. He stammered and was like, yeah, there's some dudes I know camping over there but up on the other side of the river. Then he proceeds to tell us that he's been lonely since he arrived. He was from Pennsylvania, took a bus to Lexington, and had been living in the woods back behind where I currently work. I knew exactly where he was talking about, because I saw some homeless people, immigrants, and drug addicts coming in and out of those woods every day. So basically he was a homeless man who somehow got a ride out to the gorge and decided he would just live there instead. He had been living on snakes, bugs, and selling firewood for money. But he said we were the first people he'd seen in a few weeks. His stories were all over the place, and I knew he was lying about a lot of what he told us. He wasn't alone even if he claimed to be. He even took us to his camp where there were tons of stuff for several guys, not just one. He said he liked camping up top where he could see everything, and everyone. Then showed up our campsite. He had a straight shot view. By now it was dark and he helped us get a fire going. I was trying to politely get him on his way back up the hill so I could have a minute to process all of this. When he left, I started whispering to my boyfriend that there was no way in hell I could sleep with that lying, sketchy, homeless creep right up the hill. We didn't have a gun, knife, or even a dog to protect ourselves if we needed to. My boyfriend somehow convinced me to stay a little longer, so we planned to stay the night. But all throughout the night, we heard twigs and branches snapping around our tarp, as if somebody was watching us. It was that man. I knew it was. He was standing out there, watching us. I said let's quietly get our shit together and get the hell out of there. Which we did, only we left our new tarp set up because they would make too much noise and he'd know we were leaving. As soon as I stood up with my pack, ready to get the hell out of there, he yells, "Leaving so soon?" We proceeded to get away from there as quickly as possible. The most disturbing thing, as we were getting away from there, the man yelled for us to come back. That only made us go even faster. In my mind, we were either getting robbed, raped, killed, or something, because he was not alone. His stories didn't add up, and his background of where he came from made me believe he was running from something and was trying to hide by living off the grid. I called the Rangers the next morning and told them about him. Luckily, all he got from us was a set of new tarps. I'll never forget this night. The pizza place I worked at was about to close, and I was getting ready to go home when the phone rang. I was working the counter alone that night, so I was taking calls. I picked up the phone. There was complete silence, so I hung up. About a minute later, the phone rings again, so I pick up again. Still silence. I was about to hang up again when I heard the very weak and cold voice of an old woman on the other end. She said she wanted a regular pie delivered. I remained polite on the phone, but on the inside I was screaming. I just wanted to get home and end my shift. I called out to my boss that somebody is requesting a delivery. He told me I had to go. I was upset at first, but I realized it's another tip, and the old ones usually tip the most, so I decided it was okay. I took down the address and told her it would be there soon, but she had already hung up. I thought that was rude, but I ignored it and yelled to the chef that I needed one regular. My boss told me to just go home after the delivery as the place would be closed, so a little before 10 o'clock, I got in my car and put the address into my GPS. The house was 7 miles away. The GPS took me to the quiet side of town. I arrived to the house. It was a small, one-floor house on a very quiet and empty block. I took the pizza and walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. There were no lights on in the house. I hoped that she hadn't given me the wrong address. I rang the doorbell again. There was still no answer. I was about to give up when I turned my head and saw somebody standing at the window. I got a little freaked out and backed up at first, but I eventually got closer to the window to see the person. It was an old woman, probably in her late 70s. She was just staring at me with a blank expression. I yelled to her through the glass that I had her pizza. She didn't react to what I said, so I screamed it louder. A big smile ran across her face. Not a pleasant, genuine smile. It was a smile that sent chills down my spine. I still remember that exact face she made through the window. I decided that I was freaked out enough and got back to my car and set the pizza in the passenger seat. I had to text my boss about this. I shot him a quick text and started my car, ready to get the hell away. I looked to my right to get one more look, to see the woman standing right outside my passenger side window, giving me the same stare she had given me before. I put my car in drive and floored it down the street, not looking back. My boss never made me do a late night delivery again. This happened 4 years ago when I was still in high school. I was told to do my last delivery of my shift. I got in my car, which was a 1999 Camry, perfect for delivering pizzas. I GPSed the address on my phone. I live upstate in the country, so all pizza deliveries were long drives. I remember the sun was starting to set, so it was probably around 7 o'clock. I'd say after a good 15 minutes of driving through the foresty dirt roads, my GPS said I had arrived. It was an old little cottage-like house made almost entirely of wood. It was sitting all by itself in the middle of absolutely nothing but forest. The lawn was completely unkempt, as the grass was almost at knee height. I was used to this kind of thing, so I didn't think much of it. I took the pizza to the front door. There was no doorbell, so I knocked loudly on the door. Within 10 seconds, I heard the sound of footsteps hitting wood on the inside of the house. The footsteps made it to the door and stopped. I started to feel uneasy. I got the feeling that I was being watched. And that's when I noticed there was a peephole in the door. "It's the pizza guy," I called out. I heard a low, harsh-sounding voice on the other side of the door, telling me to bring the pizza out back. I didn't like the idea of going back there. Something didn't seem right. "Are you sure, sir?" I called out. He didn't answer my question. The sound of footsteps didn't move away from the door, so I had the feeling he was still watching me. I almost found myself walking back to my car, but I decided I didn't want any trouble with my boss. The last time I brought a pizza back, he gave me attitude, so I reluctantly walked through the uncut grass and around the small house to the back. I remember there was a shed and a little patio back there. In the patio, there was a table with 4 chairs surrounding it. In one of the chairs, facing away from me, I saw the head of somebody sitting in the seat. I began walking over and said, "Excuse me," but the person didn't even move an inch. "Excuse me," I said again louder. Then from behind me, I heard, "Psst, over here." I turned around to see a man poking his head out from the corner of the house, looking at me with a crazed smile. "Come over here, I want to show you something." I freaked out, turned around and ran around the house in the opposite direction, back to my car, for some reason still holding the pizza. I got in my car, started it, and got away from there. On my way back to the pizzeria, I pulled over to the side of the road and called the police. Eventually, I was informed that there was no sign of anybody having been in that house for a long time. I quit my delivery job a few days after that. I have no idea what would have happened to me had I gone up to that man, but to this day, I still wish I had just turned my head to see who or what was sitting in that patio chair. I was doing late night deliveries during this particular shift. When I worked this job, I lived in the Poconos. It was very rural up there. I often found myself driving down roads surrounded by nothing but trees, just like this night, only it was dark and foggy this time. Driving down a shortcut to town that I had taken many times before, I slam on the brakes when I see somebody jump out from the bushes onto the road. The sickening bump and thump from the front of the car confirmed that I had hit the person. I put my hand to my forehead, cursing to myself. I couldn't believe what just happened. I just hit a person. I got out of my car and checked to see if they were alright. It was a man wearing a black hoodie with the hood up. He lay motionless by my car tire. I had no idea what to do. At this point I was panicking. Why the hell was this guy in the middle of nowhere? Why did he jump in front of my car? And then things got weirder. I can hear a scream for help, coming from the woods to the left of me. Somebody was in trouble. I looked at the man I hit with my car. He was still on the ground, motionless. I'd only be gone for a minute, I figured. For whatever stupid reason, I thought it was okay to leave the man behind, to go into the woods. I moved in the direction I heard the scream originally, hoping to hear another, but it was just total silence, except for the night creatures making their sounds. "Where are you?" I yelled out. It was at that moment I heard the sound of a foot crushing the leaves on the ground. I turned in the direction of the sound, and even in the dark and foggy weather, I could still make out the figure of somebody hiding behind a tree opposite me. I ran as fast as I could back to my car, looking back constantly to make sure I wasn't being followed. When I got back to my car, the man I had hit was gone. I didn't stick around to wonder where he went. I just got back in my car and proceeded down the road. My heart was racing the whole drive through, but I still ended up delivering the pizza. I got to the house, and when I rang the bell, a middle-aged woman answered. After paying, I noticed that her eyes focused on something behind me, and then she asked me, "They let you guys have delivery partners now?" I was confused and asked her what she meant, and she told me, "You got someone with you in your car." I felt a pain in my stomach as I turned and saw somebody sitting in the backseat of my car. I called the cops using the woman's phone, and they arrived shortly after, but the person in the backseat of my car was already gone. The scariest thing about this whole story, the police found a blood-stained knife on the floor of my car where the man was hiding. This memory still haunts me every day, and I can genuinely tell you, it's painfully scary just to imagine how things could have turned out if I hadn't made the delivery.